For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris Simpson. I'm the city administrator. I'm hoping to facilitate a conversation tonight. As you can see, we've already gotten a good amount of feedback going. We've got all of the elected officials here, I believe. I don't know if I count every single one, but almost every elected official is here, certainly representation from each ward. They've asked me to organize this town meeting tonight because they want to hear what the community thinks. So what I've done is I've prepared a very brief presentation to minimize the boredom that you might have, but hopefully give you enough information to be educated about what we're talking about. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is to get a ballot, which are over there on that table near the back, and there's a ballot box and some pens. Fill one out. It's really simple, 4 options. And then go out in the lobby and tell your elected officials what you think about what you've heard tonight, because that's what they want. They still have a decision to make. You're not voting on anything from an electoral point of view here. This is not a binding vote by any means. So this is really just a taking the community's temperature sort of exercise. So anyways, without further ado, the conversation really we're about here is what do you want Crestwood to be? We've got a level of service that we're providing, but we don't have the finances, the revenues to keep providing it at that level. The expenditures are rising. Revenues have stayed flat after they declined significantly from the early 2000s. So really what we're asking you is what kind of trade-offs are you willing to make in terms of municipal government, which is a really boring sentence, but ultimately it can be boiled down to the city government either needs to shrink or revenues need to grow. So in a snapshot, this is what our current service levels look like, at least in terms of the measures that I thought really mattered to residents, which is that our police have a really excellent response time, our fire and EMS has an excellent response time. Public Works, most people indicate a high level of approval with our snow removal services. This is really the number, these are the numbers that are really going to be impacted at the end of this if we make no changes. Because the changes that we're going to have to make are reducing expenditures. And with 75% of our expenses as in-city employees, that means that people need to leave the organization in order to balance the budget. What you'll see on the scan easel out there is, well, actually, what you won't see it on the stand easel out there, but the do nothing option, the no tax increase option, is estimated to come with about a 20 employee layoff number. And we have 89 employees, so we're talking about a significant decline in our service levels here. And what you'll see in a few slides is where most of our personnel are that we could actually get by with a lower level of service are in fire, police, and street maintenance. I want to touch on the concept of what I term a rainy day fund. The board adopted a reserve fund policy that says we need to keep at least 45% of our annual expenditures in savings. It's a prudent measure. You want to keep some money back in case a disaster happens or in case you need a huge amount of cash in a short period of time. What I like to term it as is how many months of operations do we have covered in the event of a major disaster like a Joplin tornado. And right now we've got reserve funds in excess of our 45% policy. So we could operate for over 6 months if we didn't take in a dime of revenue. And that's a very comforting thing to me when I think about what the worst case scenario might be. That leads into the 5-year projection here. So let me walk through this slightly busy chart. The yellow line at the top there, that represents our expenditures, which you can see are growing at a rapid rate. From 2015, which is the actual number that we received in 2015, 2016, where we think we'll end up here in a few months, and then we used a forecast practice for 2017 through 2021. Below that, on the white line, you see our revenue trend growing slightly, but not significantly. This is actually better than what we've realized over the last 5 years, which is we've still seen a significant decline in revenues over the previous 5 years. However, we have reason to believe that we're going to see some slow revenue growth in the near future. This dashed white line is our fund balance policy, the rainy day fund policy that I was talking about. And you can see in the green area here, That is our reserve fund level, which you see is currently at about $4.5 million, which is in excess of where our 45% policy says it should be. However, by 2017, we're projecting to be pretty much at that 45% level. And as expenditures continue to outpace revenues going forward, we will draw down those reserve funds in order to balance the budget, drawing that fund balance down over time. How did we get here? Well, this is the main culprit. We saw a 21% drop in our revenues from 2006 to 2016. That's just over $2 million. We've responded to that, attempted to live within our means. The first thing we did, the obvious thing, is to reduce your head count. This chart shows the various departments of the city government. 2003, you see the head count there. 2016, what it is today. And you can see the change. So we've eliminated 33.5 positions across all departments since 2003. That's a 27% reduction in staff. That was a significant savings. The city's in the position it is today because of the hard decisions it made in the past. We're to the point now where we need to talk about reducing this further in order to make this work. And as you can see, as I alluded to before, really the main areas that you have people available if you were looking for any sort of reductions are in those three departments there in the middle: public works, police, and fire, which nobody really wants to hear or see. But that's where we are today. That's the truth. So now the other thing we attempted to do to live within our means is we've held salaries mostly steady. Since 2009, our average employee was earning just over $51,000. Today they earn about $50,600. That's not adjusted for inflation. So our average employee is actually about $400 poorer than they were 7 years ago. The impact, we've had significant brain drain here. Nearly half of our workforce has turned over since 2010. That has a dramatic impact on our expenses from a training perspective. It has a tremendous impact on our service levels because the people who were good at their jobs, the good employees who knew what to do when certain situations came up, have left for greener pastures. And we've had to train new people who are learning the city, who are learning our policies and procedures. And while they're doing an excellent job, it's not what it could have been had they have 10 years of experience under their belt. So as we look to solutions, this is the obvious one that jumps out. The cost of service per resident on an annual basis is $678. The annual property tax revenue that we receive per resident is $91. That's a massive imbalance. We looked at other areas like sales tax revenue. We have every single sales tax that state law allows us to implement. That's where the majority of our revenue today comes from. It's, I think, approximately 80% of our total revenues is sales tax. Property taxes is significantly less. And so if we're looking at what is the most logical place, this is it right now. And that's where you come in. This chart puts Crestwood into context in terms of property tax rates with a number of the other communities in the region. These are, your kind of brand name communities that most folks would recognize: your Kirkwood, Ladue, Sunset Hills, Webster Groves, Chesterfield, et cetera, et cetera. Highlighted down here is Crestwood. We have the third lowest property tax rate among this collection of cities, which represents most of the cities in the region. De Pere is below us, Town and Country is below us. Obviously, De Pere has them all. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. The asterisk stands for municipalities that operate their own fire department. If you don't, the cities that don't have an asterisk mean they don't have a fire department, which means that residents in those communities pay a fire district for fire services. So this represents the sum of the municipal property tax and any applicable fire district tax. So you might know that Sunset Hills property tax isn't actually this amount. It's somewhere around here, and then you add in the fire district tax. Because you're getting both services, you're just getting it at a great rate here in Crestwood. A history of the property tax, it used to be higher in the 50s through the 70s. We don't have data, not great data, but I've seen specific budgets from here and there during that time period that indicated that the property tax rate was in the 55, 56, even 60-cent range just for general operating purposes. It was lowered in the 1980s, and then since the Missouri Constitution changed and effectively froze our rate at that level, and we haven't been able to raise it ever since unless we go to the voters for approval. And so we've never had it raised since then. The Crestwood voters have never passed a general purpose property tax increase. So this is that 5-year forecast again, just to refresh your memory. And then if we show the impact of a 75-cent property tax increase, you can see what that does to the forecast. By 2021, our reserve fund is in excess of the 45% level. You can see that revenues and expenditures are mostly in balance during that time. The gap at the end there is narrow enough that the random chances of time can easily make that a totally even projection. So again, I circle back to the original question. We're here to hear from you. We want to know what kind of city you want Crestwood to be. We've got a variety of options on stand easels out there in the lobby, so you can kind of see what the impacts might look like. Obviously, we don't have any specific plan if voters only approve a 25-cent property tax increase. I know in terms of the dollar amount, what we need to do to make that financially sustainable, but we can at least, I can tell you that it's going to impact service levels in a negative fashion. I don't have exact, it's going to reduce this by 35% or increase your response times by 2 minutes. I can tell you it will go up. The way you do police services, you have sectors, and you have so many police officers, and we have so many calls for service that we receive. If we have fewer people receiving the same amount of calls for service, then that means there's going to be a greater gap of time in responding to those calls. There's nothing complicated about it. So we want to hear what you think. We've got the ballots in the ballot box back there. The aldermen are out in the lobby there. They want to hear from you personally. So please go to them, ask questions, tell them what you think. If you think this is a terrible idea, tell them it's a terrible idea. If you think it's a great idea, tell them it's a great idea. And thank you for being here. I'll take a few questions. In the back?
Yes. In reference to where, if we got the 75-cent increase,
Yes.
$50 increase, where does that put us in relation to all the cities that you listed? Where are we then?
Sure. And I've got this mocked up on a chart out in the lobby, so you can see the varying levels and how that compares us. We're at 25 cents right now. It's a little cut off on the left-hand side, but this is the dollar level. So 75 cents plus 25 cents, we'd be roughly at $1. And that would put us right in this range. Yes?
Is the sales tax option off the table? You said you'd like the property tax better, but is the sales tax off the table?
So, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to resist the urge to get too nerdy into this, but cities are considered creatures of the state, meaning we can't do anything that Missouri doesn't let us do. So in terms of sales taxes, the state legislature has to pass a law saying cities can adopt this type of sales tax, and they have done that. There's a park and stormwater sales tax. There's a capital improvement sales tax. We have those. The state law said we could do them, so we did them. We've got a 1/4-cent fire protection sales tax. We did that. So we've got all of the major sales taxes that the state allows us to charge.
Are we at the taxes?
Yes.
So
The highest
any more
authorized
taxes,
amount.
we can't go any higher on them.
Correct.
Yeah. Let's go back to that. The current 5-year plan.
This one.
Right there. Because not too distant past, our revenue funds, rainy day funds, was at 0. Okay, and it came up to over 4 million. How did we get that in there?
How did we gain those?
How did we gain that 4 million?
Sure. We did it by expenditures completely steady, which means no salary increases for employees, deferring a number of expenditures. We had police cars and snow plows that we put off purchasing. And obviously, we extend those to the extent that we can, but we had police cars, I'm told, that had holes in the floorboards, Flintstone style. And so there's a reasonable extent you can go before you say this is ridiculous. So we're trying to operate a city that provides a high level of service to our residents. And it comes with certain necessary expenditures like maintaining your buildings, and hopefully paying your employees every now and then. And that's really what happened in the interim. There was a number of expenditures were not made, or we were trying to get by with fewer employees than we had, and it impacted services to the level that we realized it was unsustainable. Sir?
I guess 3 questions.
3.
How soon could this increase be put before the voters? Secondly, is it just more than 50% to approve it, or is it 66 or 2/3? And then if you would speak, we're talking about revenue somehow to offset expenditures. Other sources of revenue that look to be a year or two over the next 5 years, as people hopefully feel good about the mall and they come back into the area.
Sure. So your first one was how soon? Next April. The board has until the first meeting in January to pass an ordinance putting something on the ballot. So that's the soonest that we can put voters to the question. We wouldn't start receiving those revenues until late that year.
2017.
Correct. Your second question was it's a 50%.
50%.
Yes, simple majority. And then your third question was sort of what does the future hold in terms of revenues? And obviously that's the mall question. And the easy answer is we don't exactly know yet. We know the mall's coming down, but it's going to take multiple years for that to be constructed. I can't tell what the economy is going to do in a 1.5 or 2 years. If there's another recession, the mall that we thought was going to be built by 2019 might not be built until 2026. And if we're making key strategic decisions this year that put us in a fiscally sustainable position based on the assumption that the economy is going to go okay and that the mall is going to get built to a certain standard and it's going to generate X dollars of revenue, and that doesn't happen, or worst case, it doesn't happen to such a dramatic degree that it's not even built, we're going to be having this conversation again in 2.5 years, and we're going to be in a much worse position. We're going to be saying this is really bad now. I would like to think that this type of conversation is hopefully a once a decade, if not longer, type conversation. It's the voters for this type of question. Sir, the third one.
Well, in light of your last comment, I would agree, and I think all of us would agree we don't want to have this conversation again. But the question I have is would we have it again? Why are our sales tax revenues, they declined? Now they're kind of level, slightly going up. The obvious focus is the mall, but that can become a scapegoat for all the other empty office space that's on Watson Road. Is there a reason why our sales tax is not rebounded? And like when I drive Watson, I go through Sunset Hills, through Crestwood, and through Acton and Shrewsbury. I see most of those communities, they're prospering. And then you drive through Crestwood, and it's not just the mall, but there's empty stores everywhere. So that's obviously a loss in sales revenue. Now, I was under the impression that we've hired a firm to give us a total development plan. This is focusing on one aspect of the plan, which is general sales property tax revenue. What about sales tax? Are we a business unfriendly community? Are there things we need to change to generate growth?
I don't believe anything is ever good enough. We can always be a more business friendly community. Things that we're doing, and I'll tell you some of the factors that I believe led to the decline of the Watson Road corridor. First and most of all is traffic counts. That's a statistic that most retailers look at. They want to know how many vehicles per day are driving by the building that I'm going to own and I'm trying to sell it. Because people driving by are potential customers. Their eye is on your product, so they're like driving around advertisements. With the mall closing, obviously that was a major source of traffic generation that is now gone. And not only that, it was an eyesore. It's an eyesore, and whenever anyone looked at it, they thought dilapidated, they thought tired, they think this is a community in decline. So it was not just not producing anything, it had a net negative impact on the community. It's like a black hole. And you could see the impact across the street at the Commons and up and down the corridor. It sucked businesses' life away by it going away. Redeveloping the mall, I think it's already started some positive buzz. I mean, obviously I'm involved in it on a day-to-day basis, but I feel like Crestwood's name is coming up more positively in terms of development than it has in the past. We're obviously trying to capitalize on that. The comprehensive plan that you referred to is going to help us guide the city in terms of those decisions. The Board of Aldermen has already adopted several policies that I believe make us a more competitive city. We've joined 2 districts that will enable us to take advantage of energy efficiency and renewable energy improvements. Those things will save business owners money by lowering their costs because their buildings operate more efficiently. They have a lower cost to operate, and that makes this a better place to do business because it's cheaper. So we've already taken advantage of that. We have a city planner on staff who has an extensive amount of experience in economic development. He's done a great job so far working with the business community. Sarah, my assistant over here, we started a business liaison program because we want to reach out and get face-to-face with our business community. So I tasked her, and she goes out and visits at least 7 businesses every single month. We have about 300. So you can do the math in terms of how long it would take for her to touch every single business and just let them know, here we are, we want to hear about your problems, and if there's anything we can do to make Crestwood a better place, let us know. If you're thinking about leaving, or you're thinking about, better yet, you're thinking about expanding, let us know, we'll help you. So those are some of the things we've done to try and develop the Watson Road corridor. Another thing that I'm really proud of is in the redevelopment agreement for the mall, we negotiated for $1.5 million that the developer is going to reimburse us for to get rid of some of the medians along Watson. Because one of the main complaints that we heard in our business survey from last year was the medians were really an obstacle to access on their properties. By removing those, we'll be able to hopefully beautify the corridor a little bit, make it a more attractive place, and then to improve access to those businesses makes them more valuable, lets them take advantage of the improving traffic counts. So all this is part of a broader goal, but it doesn't happen overnight. You can't turn it around in a year. But that's what we're shooting for, is that long-term development. Anybody else? Sir?
And any of your tax increase proposals you have, can maybe, I guess, turn a little bit, for lack of a better term, so it comes to 2025 and the mall's back in boom, the first taxes have sunset on them?
Yes, they can. However, I want to offer up a note of caution, which is that if the mall did take longer to get built, then we're talking about, oh, we got to renew the sunsetted tax, and that's a risky proposition when you're talking about something that is now, you know, it's talking about like, do I need this left leg? It's temporary, but maybe it'll be better in 5 years. I don't know. What you can do though, and obviously this is where voters being involved with their elected officials come in, is the property tax can be rolled back in the future. Just because you approve it at 75 cents, after that's, let's say that's passed next April, the first thing we're going to be doing in May is adopting an ordinance setting the property tax rate, which means we can set it up to the amount that voters approved it. Now, we might set it at that rate right away, or they might set it at some rate lower than that. And then every single year, they re-adopt and set that property tax. So if in 4 years, for instance, we're doing great, they could set it at 5 cents, 10 cents lower than that. That's a decision now. You actually have a choice. Whereas right now, we're just setting it at the max automatic. There's no thought about it because that's what we need to get by. Sir, you had a question.
Yeah, my comment was the same as his.
Okay.
As far as the term limit on there, you know, I wouldn't mind having this conversation again in 5 years.
Okay.
Bring it up if we still need to look on the positive side, yeah. You know, we're gonna bring the revenues up, hopefully the mall gets going, other businesses pick up too. Let's have this talk again instead of moving it up the chance that it's gonna come back down.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say you staying engaged with your elected officials and telling them you need to roll the tax back or else I'm going to vote for somebody else is how you have the conversation. But you're talking to the guy that's going to be having sleepless nights until every time we go out to the question. So I'm speaking from my own bias there, but I understand your position. You should tell your elected officials your opinion out there because they haven't made the decision. Sure.
You mentioned that during the 80s, the tax rate came down.
Correct.
What action was taken to bring those down?
I believe it was an action of the Board of Aldermen. And then what happened was the Missouri voters passed the Hancock Amendment, and that put the cap on what your current rate was is what your cap is. If they had waited, if they were 2 years later and we were at 65 cents and then they lowered it, then we wouldn't be in the position we are today. Yes, sir.
if we're taking the approach of replacing our current services with contract services with the fire, what happens to the facilities capital?
Well, I'll answer your question with two responses. The first was we did look at contracting out services earlier this year. We looked at contracting with St. Louis County for police, and the residents came out en masse and quashed that idea rather quickly, saying, no, we want to keep our services. What would happen if we contracted with someone else? I'll tell you what the county told us. I believe they would utilize our current facilities had we gone with them, and they would have bought whatever equipment that they felt that they were willing to take, they would have paid us for. So we could have sold that stuff, but that's a one-time injection of cash. And what ultimately was, I'm sorry.
Therefore, we would still have effectively local fire protection. We wouldn't have to be calling her phone.
You were still down on the line. Correct. Yeah, effectively, it would feel like it was local services to the resident, though there no longer would be, say, a fire chief that answers to me, who answers to the elected officials. It would be the county or the fire district, depending on which service you're talking about.
Response times vastly increase. For 911 calls and contract out.
The increase or
Yeah, the response.
takes longer?
Yes, it increases. You understand what
In the back.
we serve our fire department in the district. We have to pay like the district
So
charges. In other words, no health fire protection district charges the budget.
what you're asking is a simple question that's really complicated to answer, and I'm not prepared to answer it tonight. We haven't considered what it would look like if we, say, dissolved their fire services, what that would mean, because those fire districts don't already currently overlap Crestwood. So it's unclear to me what would happen if we stopped, who would, I guess, first off, they would have to agree to annex Crestwood as a service area. That would probably have to go to the voters. It's complicated. But I think ultimately what would happen is, yes, you would end up paying taxes to one of the two fire districts in the area, whether it's Melville or Afton. Both of them charge taxes greater than what we're asking for tonight. Yes, sir.
Why has Crestwood for a long time had to pay such a chunk of money to the Afton Fire Department? Who got us into that debacle and why did it take to get out of it?
So,
How much money is that?
on an annual basis, it's in the $400,000 range. And that payment is, maybe to you, I'm not as rich as you are.
How do we get out of it?
It's mandated by state law. So it would either have to be a negotiated agreement with the Afton Fire Protection District or change to state law. We have made efforts this year to lobby the state legislature to change that law. They were unsuccessful. We continue to work with our partner community, Hazelwood, to try and bring about some change in that area. Hazelwood's actually feeling it a lot worse than we are, not to get too off topic, but $2.50 of their property tax on the left-hand side of their fire district, and they're being made bankrupt by that tax. Sir in red.
Based on your chart of our expenditures out for police and fire protection, whatever the case may be, it almost appears that's a moot point. The key thing I want to focus in on is the mall, and why is it taking so long? What kind of hangups are they having? And was this something, again, I was not part of the mall project and getting in on that, but since that seems to be the cusp of why our revenues went down, that also would be the reason why our revenues would go up. What is the major holdback, and are there issues that where you're talking about maybe moving out to 2026? Is that going to affect the taxability issue they got in that negotiated project?
I should apologize because I think maybe we had a miscommunication, or I might have spoken wrong. I didn't mean to imply that the mall is facing an immediate a delay in construction.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't think,
but
I'm just saying that.
Sure, but that's something that could happen were the economy to turn sour in a year and a half, 2 years. I mean, who could say they saw the 08 recession coming? except for those guys, I guess, in the Big Short. And that's basically what I'm talking about in terms of we can't bank on the mall yet because it's not built. Once it's built and generating revenues will be good. They're not facing any hiccups or delays other than the normal construction type delays that you'd see. Weather, we found something that was a little bit more of a problem. You can see they're making progress every single day, and I know that they're starting to work on. They're going to be working on the exterior of the Dillard's building here either later this week or next week. You're going to start seeing that come down as well. So they're moving as quickly as they can, but it's a complicated demolition project because of all the environmental issues with the site. So they're expecting still that that's going to be down and done by next spring, and then they can start construction again.
So you're saying environmental issues is the key thing that's causing the problem?
They had to clear out asbestos, lead paint, they stripped out the entire inside. And then they had to pull the insides out and then they could take the outside down. Whereas everyone probably wanted them to just put a bunch of TNT on it and just poof, be done. They couldn't do it that way. Yes?
We have some people who are waiting to get in.
Okay, well then I should wrap things up. Obviously anyone that wants to stick around for another presentation, please do. Grab a ballot well, I guess they're out in the lobby now, and then talk to your elected officials out in the lobby. They're the ones that have to make a decision about this, so they need to hear from you and what you think.
Thank you for tuning in to the City of Crestwood Town Meeting
You were running that whole time?
2016. Yeah.
Yikes.